The issue of education is one of the most sensitive in the history of South Africa. The issue of education is one of the most personal for parents, for communities, for children themselves. The issue of education is an interesting issue because it quickly exposes how people truly feel about reforms, about books that are being taught about in those particular schools, about the ideas that are being taught in the classroom. The issue of education will quickly expose beliefs about who should be hanging out with who, how parents feel about children being friends. A lot of things are exposed when you have an honest conversation about things that are going on in the classroom. And this is why the BELA Act is such a litmus test for the government of national unity. What we've seen right now is that there have been contradictory statements about the status of the BELA Act as things stand right now. And it's going to really show us the health of this particular GNU and the future of the GNU. This BELA bill, this BELA Act, it's going to be quite dramatic. I say that the issue of education exposes a lot, and you may not believe me, but it's true. Whether it's public education or private education. Let me give you an example. There's a private school called St Cyprian in Cape Town, and a father and the school recently went to court over 400,000 in unpaid fees. 400,000 in unpaid fees. The school is a beautiful school. It's in the Gardens area in Cape Town. It has beautiful views of the mountain. It has well manicured fields, all of the sporting codes. It's a lovely school. So the school went to court, and the parent has been interdicted from reapplying to have his daughter admitted to this girls' school next year because of the debt, and also because the school has really been trying to work with the parent, and the parent has not been coming to the party. So the Western Cape High Court ruled in favor of St Cyprian School after the parent failed to pay school fees, but also after he refused to have a restructured debt agreement. So the school tried to say, listen, one more year, let's do another restructuring, because for 4 years, basically, the school costs about 90,000 rands a year. And this parent basically has not paid for 4 years. And they're saying, let's restructure the deal. Let's see what we can do as a last-ditch effort. The parent then said, no, I don't have the money for that. Then the school said, okay, let's enroll your daughter in an alternative school. The alternative school is a government-subsidized school. It's in the same suburb where the parent has a son who goes to the same school. The parent said no. Guess what the parent said no for? The parent said, this father said, the alternative school is unsuitable because it's not predominantly white, and this does not align with his daughter's cultural values. Can you imagine? This dad and the daughter, because he's saying it's the daughter, but I don't know if it's the daughter or it's him. But fundamentally, he's saying, St. Cyprian, you can't change my kid's school, because if you send her to another school, that school has too many blacks, and my daughter is not culturally adjusted to that. Apparently, her cultural values are going to a school with lots of white kids. Anyway, obviously the court ruled against the dad, and St. Cyprian won, so he'll have to send his kid to the school, and his daughter will have to adjust her values. Sorry, daughter. Sorry, father. That's the way life goes sometimes. And anyway, your brother already goes to the... that story perplexed me, but what it was interesting for me, why it's interesting for me to bring up that story is just to show you that when you have issue of education on the table, parents will quickly show you their true colors, and maybe even the kids will show you their true colors. Another example, in America, we saw how parents felt about the issue of transgender bathrooms. We saw how they felt about transgender athletes participating in school sports. One of the most talked about ads in the campaign was the Trump ads, which were saying, Kamala is for they, them, and Donald Trump is for you. The closures of schools during the pandemic, especially in America, was another polarizing point. So these examples show us that if you want to understand the heart of a community, the heart of parents, the heart of children, schools will show you. Schools will always show you. And we've seen that the BELA issue is going to be a big fight because AfriForum, Democratic Alliance, Solidarity, all of these entities went and had a march at the Footricker Monument in Pretoria, a monument which was used during apartheid times as a rallying monument by the nationalist government. So if you think about it, the National Party government, if you think about it, this issue is already showing the fractures between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, but also the communities which don't want to transform those schools, to make those schools dual medium. They want those schools to remain Afrikaans only. So something interesting happened a few days ago. The Minister of Basic Education issued a statement, and I'm going to go through the statement, and then the president issued a statement, and I'm going to go through his statement. And then we're going to think about how these statements don't reconcile. So this is what the media statement by the Minister of Basic Education said. On the 1st of October, Solidarity initiated a dispute process through NEDLAC to seek authorization to undertake a protected protest to express opposition to Sections 4 and 5 of the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act. The Minister of Basic Education and the Presidency were cited as respondents in the matter. Following weeks of NEDLAC consultations between the delegations representing Solidarity, the Minister of Basic Education, and the Presidency, and following bilateral consultations between delegations representing Solidarity and the Minister of Basic Education, the Minister of Basic Education is happy to announce that a settlement of the dispute was reached on the 27th of November 2024. NEDLAC has confirmed that the dispute has been settled. It must be noted that this NEDLAC process was separate from and does not in any way serve as a substitute for the consultations that are currently underway between the parties within the Government of National Unity. The Minister of Basic Education and Solidarity have entered into a bilateral settlement agreement dated 25 November, in terms of which the parties have reached an understanding of how concerns relating to Sections 4 and 5 of the BELA Act may be addressed. The understanding was forged based on constructive engagement. And then the minister then added her own voice to the statement. She said, "This validates my long-held view that dialogue is the best remedy for conflict resolution," said Minister Siviwe Kwarube. She further added that, "In terms of the bilateral settlement agreement, and as part and parcel of my constitutional mandate to be a true and faithful counselor to the President, I will make recommendations to President Ramaphosa on the commencement arrangements for the BELA Act, recommending that Sections 4D, 4F, and 5C of the BELA Act be commenced once certain national policies, national norms, and standards and national regulations have been made to support the implementation of these sections. Full details of the recommendations are set out in the attached bilateral settlement agreement. The national policies, national norms, and standards and national regulations to be developed in this regard must provide greater legal clarity on the factors to be considered and more comprehensive consultation mechanisms that need to be followed in relation to the following decision-making processes. The decision by the head of a provincial education department to depart from the admission policy determined by a school governing body for a public school, the decision by a provincial head of department to direct a public school to add an additional language of instruction, the decision by a head of provincial education department to request a school governing body to review its admission policy or language policy, all recommendations that the Minister of Basic Education will make to the President in respect to Sections 4D, 4F, and 5C of the BELA Act are informed by the need to protect and preserve the careful balance of powers and functions that have to be conferred by law on three partners in basic education. It then says, The BELA Act requires the president to proclaim the commencement arrangements applicable to the act. The Minister of Basic Education wishes to thank NEDLAC for facilitating this process and expresses thanks and gratitude to each of the social partners involved for the constructive way in which this matter has been resolved at NEDLAC, issued by the Department of Basic Education. So that's the minister and her statement, right? But the president then came out with his own statement. Before we go to the president's statement, let me give you a background of why this particular story or this particular act came into being. In Mpumalanga, there's a high school called Emelo High School. It's an Afrikaans medium school. The school was founded in 1914. And in about 2006, the Department of Education approached the school and said, listen, we have crowded schools in this area. Some of the schools had high school classes which had up to 65 students in them. So they say to them, you guys now have 580 something students. You have a capacity for over 1,000 students, specifically 1,200 students. Can you accommodate some of these students? The school said they have to be Afrikaans speaking. The department said, no, that's not necessarily going to work. Some of these students want to learn in English. They've already been learning in English. They can't come and start learning Afrikaans in high school. School said, tough. Best thing that we can do is to give you this unused, disused laundry. You can put a few of these students in the laundry. In 2007, the department then came with some students, about 72 students, and said to the school, enroll these students, teach them in English. The school governing body said no. Then the head of department then said, okay, I'm dissolving the school governing body. I'm putting an interim governing body. That governing body is going to change the medium of instruction for the school to become a dual medium school, not to abandon Afrikaans, but to become a dual medium school. This case went to the High Court. Gauteng High Court actually supported the Department of Education. Then it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Appeal overturned that original decision, and the Constitutional Court upheld the Supreme Court decision on technicalities, because when the head of department appointed this interim committee to simply change the language, he was using two different provisions of the act which empowered him to make those decisions, but because he was doing one to achieve the other under administrative law, complicated, but to simplify it, that tainted the whole decision, and then the court ruled in favor of the school. So the school won. And that's something that left a sour taste in the department, because these Model C schools, what happened was under apartheid, in Bantu Education Act sought to create differentiated education systems. The National Party was angry that the Catholic schools, the mission schools, were providing quality education to black people. So they made a law, centralized all of the education, created two streams for teacher training, and differentiated the public education provided in the suburbs to the white areas, and provided to the townships and the rural areas. And the quality of education that was being provided in the townships and rural areas was designed to be mediocre and exclusionary. So what they also did is that they funded disproportionately the schools. So the schools that were in the suburbs were well-funded, well-resourced, not crowded. The schools that were in the townships were congested and under-resourced. That's the history. That's how we came into this particular situation where the BELA Act is a reality. So the BELA Act corrects that anomaly and creates a situation where the provincial department head can actually make those decisions. What the NEDLAC deal is trying to do is to create multiple layers of steps so that the head of department can't just make that decision. That's why they are saying that there needs to be more clarity on the factors to be considered and more comprehensive consultation mechanisms to be followed. So what AfriForum, Solidarity, and these other groups are trying to do is they're trying to create many legal hurdles before a head of department can make this decision. Whereas the way the law is designed now, it gives some flexibility to the heads of department to be actually able to restructure the admissions policy and the language policy of the school relatively flexibly, right? Considering issues of the demographics of an area, considering issues of the needs, because these are all government schools. These are all government funded schools. the fee-paying schools allow the school governing bodies to also charge fees. But there are provisions that can be created for people who are poor, et cetera, for them to also attend the school without necessarily paying those fees. But in the main, those schools remain fee-paying schools, and this is about making them more inclusive. Imagine you've got a school with 500 students. It's got capacity for over 1,200. The schools are around it with 2,000 students, with students in 60, with classes with one teacher per 65 students. That's something that does require remediation, and this is why the BELA Act is causing the tensions that it's causing in the Afrikaner community, particularly those who want to preserve the Afrikaans medium-only identity of those schools, which in many instances makes them predominantly white schools as well, right? So that's what the minister made a deal with Solidarity around. Then the president issued his own statement. The statement was issued on Sunday. President Ramaphosa affirms the role of the multi-party process on the BELA Act. President Cyril Ramaphosa has noted the settlement agreement between the Minister of Basic Education and the Solidarity Union on the Basic Laws Amendment Act. The BELA bill was passed by the 6th Democratic Parliament on the 26th of October 2023. The president assented to the bill on the 13th of September 2024. During the public signing of the bill, President Ramaphosa announced his decision to delay the implementation date for sections 4 and 5 of the bill by 3 months. The decision was to afford parties time to deliberate on the issues of admission and language policy contained in the two sections and to submit proposals on how the disputed settlement elements in the sections will be resolved. On 28 November 2024, the Minister of Basic Education announced that she had signed an agreement with Solidarity on the exercise of her powers and responsibilities on the implementation of the BELA Act. It is worth noting that Solidarity is just one among many interested parties in the matter. The agreement between the minister and Solidarity has no bearing in law or practical effect on the inclusive multi-party discussions that are underway on sections 4 and 5 of the Act. Furthermore, the agreement bears no influence on the President's powers to ultimately take a decision on the commencement of the Act. He's rebuking her. This is a very strong rebuke because of how she went public with this issue and also on how she's trying to undermine his authority, his power. President Ramaphosa reiterates his commitment to the undertaking he made when he signed the bill on 13 September 2024 to give parties 3 months to submit proposals on sections 4 and 5. The president therefore awaits the outcomes of those deliberations. It must be noted that the BELA Act was duly passed by Parliament and assented to by the President. It is now law. The Minister of Basic Education is enjoined to work towards its implementation, sections 4 and 5 aside. The next step is for the President to determine the date of commencement and for the necessary regulations to be finalized. This will be done without undue delay. The President is bound by the Constitution and the law and remains steadfast in ensuring transformation in the education sector for the benefit of present and future generations of learners. Issued by the Presidency in Pretoria. The Presidency is being very tough in the language that in politics there's a lot of diplomacy, but even in that diplomacy you can see the tough talk that is coming out of particular offices. Then Helen Zille issued a statement of her own. Here's what the Helen Zille statement says. The DA, so it says, everyone must respect the agreement on the BELA Act reached at NEDLAC. She's actually challenging the president's position. The DA calls on all interested and affected parties. Let me do a Helen Zille voice. The DA calls on all interested and affected parties to accept the outcome of the settlement negotiated at NEDLAC between the Presidency, the Department of Basic Education, and Solidarity on behalf of the teachers affiliated to this union. The negotiations were a mandatory process conducted in terms of the law to prevent strike action arising from the controversy surrounding various clauses in the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act. No political parties were represented in these negotiations except DA. Anyway, Back to my voice. No political parties were represented in these negotiations. The talks included only the presidency, the Department of Basic Education as the employer, and Solidarity representing certain teachers' unions. These negotiations and the agreement reached by consensus are a prime example of NEDLAC fulfilling the purpose for which it was established, to give interested and affected parties the opportunity to negotiate settlements rather than resort to strike action. Now that the presidency, the DBE, and Solidarity have reached and signed an agreement, it is incumbent upon everyone to respect the outcome of the statutory process and not seek to undermine it for party political purposes. In particular, it is incumbent on the presidency to uphold an agreement it was party to. The representatives of the presidency involved in the negotiations regularly reverted to their principles to seal their negotiating mandate. Yet the deputy president, who is an integral part of the presidency, has now rejected the right of NEDLAC to reach a settlement in terms of the law. He is demanding that the matter be resolved by the ad hoc clearinghouse committee set up by the cabinet. According to the DA's legal advice, an ad hoc informal committee cannot override an agreement reached through a statutory process. To make matters worse, Matome Chilowane, the ANC MEC for Education in Gauteng, has voiced his firm rejection of the agreement. This is an extraordinary situation. A statutory body produces a negotiated settlement in terms of the law involving the presidency, the DBE, and a trade union, and the radical economic transformation faction of the ANC mobilizes to override it without following any legal processes. This is pure political posturing that undermines institutions designed to solve problems through negotiation and prevent conflict. It is all the more ominous. It is all the more ominous because it involves the deputy president openly challenging a settlement approved by the president. This battle is about the internal battle for control of the ANC, and it is clear that the radical economic transformation faction will ride roughshod over the law and due process to seize power. For our part, the Democratic Alliance welcomes the fact that a constructive solution was negotiated to the BELA crisis in a forum that did not involve political parties, and we support the outcome of this process. Issued by Helen Ziller, DA Federal Council Chairperson, 29th of November 2024. So in terms of timeline, the Helen Ziller statement actually comes before the presidency statement. So what happened was, we saw first the statement being given by Siviwe Garube. We then saw pushback coming from members of the ANC. We also saw pushback coming from the South African Democratic Teachers Union, SATU, the largest teachers union in South Africa. Then we saw the presidency issuing that rebuke and a statement. He even said on video that, the deal that Siviwe Garube got was not a valid one. Here's what he said.
The issue of the BELA Act, which I issued a statement about earlier today, is a matter that's being handled, but in the end, the president signed the bill, and I've given 3 months for solutions to be found, and those solutions have to be credible. They have to be solutions that everyone buys into, and my resolve in having given people an opportunity to find solutions should never be abused. It should never be diverted. It should never be downplayed. I am quite resolute in saying that come the 31st of December, there's no solution. What I signed into law is activated. So there must therefore be a rush to finalize that in a credible way, in a way that has integrity, that has credibility, and that is broadly accepted by everyone.
The deputy president has also weighed in, and he spoke to Sunday Times, and he said that there is no agreement on BELA. He rubbished the apparent signing of this agreement, and he wrote a letter to the GNU partners saying that he was not consulted on the agreement entered into by the Minister of Basic Education, Solidarity and NEDLAC. And in the letter, he says, as far as he's concerned, there is no agreement on what ought to happen to the delayed sections of the Act. There's 4 and 5 sections, the clauses which deal with these particular issues of language of instruction and admission. And Mashatile is actually the chairperson of the clearinghouse, which is supposed to be a deadlock breaking mechanism. And he has been in discussions with several parties on these particular issues. He said he wasn't contested and that the clearinghouse is meant to actually meet to finalize discussions and debate on what is going to happen. So 2 versions from the DA, 1 version from the ANC, rejection from the teachers' unions. What this whole saga is going to show us is, number 1, how committed is the president to making accommodations to the DA and its alliance partners? It doesn't really have alliance partners, but in this case it does, right? Because AfriForum and Solidarity are in alliance with DA on this issue. If these clauses are implemented at the same time, if they implemented if the 3 months period ends and all of the clauses are then set to go ahead in time for January, because remember, schools open in Jan, right? Then the DA will be in a very weak position and they may have to think about their next strategic moves. The DA is already trying to make this seem as if he does that, he's giving in to the Mashatile faction, Panyazale Sufi faction, and therefore those guys are now running the ANC. So they're trying to make it it's basically a divide and rule. But what happens with this will show us, 1, where the president is, 2, what the thinking is within the ANC on this issue, 3, what role Paul Mashatile is going to have moving forward. Because what the DA is also trying to do here is to sidestep the clearinghouse and to conflict resolve outside of that. So they are not trying to work with Paul Mashatile. And he's also trying to impose himself. So there are multiple things here. And we have to keep a very close eye on this particular issue, because once this plays out, it will show us the dynamics of the GNU, the real dynamics. And remember, there's going to be another fight about the healthcare system and the NHI, the National Health Insurance. And we'll be able to see from how everything plays out here, how the president is going to move and what the balance of forces are within the GNU. Because this school issue is a very sensitive issue. You saw how Solidarity and AfriForum and them went there. But at the same time, I'm with the ANC on this one. It's really heartbreaking to think that there can be schools that are overcrowded and then some kids are not learning in an overcrowded environment, but those are all government schools. And that there was a school governing body that wanted people to use a laundry to learn while other kids were learning in classrooms. That really, it hurts. And it's worrying that they were not willing to be accommodative and inclusive. Because this whole fight that, you're going to lose Afrikaans culture if it's dual medium, I don't think it's true. We've all learned in English medium schools, but our African traditions are fine. Because culture is not just about what language you learn in a classroom, right? It's about the values at home, the traditions at home, etc., etc. So it would really be a travesty if President Ramaphosa actually gave the DA what they want here. I have issues with the BELA bill, by the way, the BELA Act, but not because of the language. I actually have an issue with it because I think it has diluted the authority of teachers, because one of the provisions deals with discipline. And I think it redefines corporal punishment very broadly to extend to anything which a student can subjectively then say, I was abused by that teacher. And, if you make a kid go sit in the back of the classroom or maybe make them stand, they can say, no, that's corporal punishment. I don't think it is corporal punishment, but the definition is so broad that it takes away elements of discipline. You need discipline in a classroom. And if you don't have discipline as a teacher, you don't have tools. My mother was a teacher. And if you don't have tools of discipline, I don't think it will work well for a teacher. Teachers need to have some instruments available to them to maintain order in the classroom. So I think that the BELA bill takes away too many of those. So I don't support, the BELA Act so I don't support the act as it stands. But I'm curious, where do you stand on this issue? Where do you stand on this issue of the BELA Act and whether or not these schools should be inclusive? Do you know? Someone last time was from that Mpumalanga area, the Emelo area, and they told us that it was very painful what happened to the kids who had to learn in the laundry. And they gave us a clear explanation of why they support that. It's in the comments on a video that I made about this very issue before. But I'm curious, what do you think? Let's have a conversation till the next one.